The stars had always been silent. For 300 years, humanity had looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They built colonies on Mars. They made homes on the frozen moons of Jupiter and Saturn. They sent probes into the darkness, hoping to find someone, anyone, who might answer their call. On the morning of September 15th, 2347, the silence ended. Commander David Chen was drinking his third cup of coffee at the Jupiter monitoring station when his screen lit up with warnings. At first, he thought it was a glitch. Then he thought it was an asteroid. But asteroids did not appear out of thin air. Asteroids did not number in the thousands. And asteroids did not arrange themselves into perfect military formations. "God help us," he whispered. The ships were enormous. Each one was the size of a city, covered in strange organic metal that seemed to breathe and pulse with alien life. They emerged from tiers in space itself, folding reality like paper to cross distances that should have taken centuries. Within minutes, 2,000 warships hung in the void near Jupiter, blocking out the stars with their massive shadows. The message came 30 minutes later. It broadcast on every frequency, in every language, as if the aliens had been studying humanity for years. Species 7,842. You are catalogued. You are claimed. Surrender your world, your resources, and your bodies for service to the Dominion. You have one planetary rotation to comply. Resistance is extinction. The voice belonged to High Arbiter Kethvaran, commander of the Valdrix subjugation fleet. He had spoken these words many times before. He had said them to the crystal beings of Arathi Prime before his ships turned their world to glass. He had said them to the proud warriors of the Dellan before he drowned their oceans in fire. In 300 years of conquest, not a single species had refused him. Not a single species had survived trying. On Earth, panic spread like wildfire. People filled the streets of every major city, looking up at the sky as if they could see the alien fleet with their naked eyes. News channels showed the same footage over and over. Massive ships hanging in space, weapons that glowed with terrible energy, and that voice repeating its demand for surrender. World leaders gathered in Geneva within hours. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and admirals, all packed into one room to face the impossible question. What do we do? General Secretary Liu Wei of the United Terran Coalition stood at the head of the table, his face pale but his voice steady. Our entire fleet numbers 400 ships. They have 2,000. Our weapons are chemical rockets and nuclear missiles. Theirs can tear holes in reality itself. The math is simple. We cannot win this fight. Admiral Yuki Tanaka sat at the far end of the table, silent and still. She was 63 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. She commanded Earth's defense fleet, and she knew better than anyone how outmatched they were. But something about her expression made the others nervous. She did not look defeated. She looked like she was waiting. "Are you suggesting we surrender?" asked President Morrison of the American states, his voice tight with anger. "I am suggesting we face reality," Liu Wei replied. "If we fight, we die. All of us. Every man, woman, and child on Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. The aliens have done this before. They will do it again. Perhaps if we surrender, some of us will survive. As slaves," Admiral Tanaka said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken. "The Valdrix do not take prisoners. They take property. I have read the intelligence reports from the probe we sent to the edge of their space 20 years ago. They breed conquered species like cattle. They work them until they die. They erase their cultures, their languages, their very identities. Survival under the Valdrix is not life. It is a slow extinction." The room fell silent. Outside, they could hear crowds chanting, screaming, praying. Liu Wei spread his hands. "Then what do you suggest, Admiral? A glorious last stand? A noble death that accomplishes nothing?" Tanaka's communicator buzzed. She looked at the screen, and for the first time, a small smile crossed her face. "I suggest," she said slowly, "that we stop pretending we have shown them all our cards." She stood and walked to the window, looking up at the darkening sky. 87 years ago, we found something in the Kuiper Belt. A ship, not human, not Valdrix, something older. Something from a civilization that fought the Valdrix long before humanity existed. They called themselves the Precursors, and they lost their war. But before they died, They left us a gift. The other leaders exchanged confused looks. None of them had heard of this. For 87 years, Tanaka continued. We have studied that ship. We have learned its secrets, and we have built something that officially does not exist. She turned to face them, and her eyes were hard as iron. We have built the Black Armada. At that moment, deep beneath the surface of the moon, lights flickered on in a cavern that had been sealed since 2260. Dust fell from ships that had never flown, never fired their weapons, never shown themselves to friend or enemy. They were painted in a black so deep that light itself seemed to fall into them and disappear. 150 warships, built from alien metal, armed with weapons that could fold space, powered by captured singularities. Director Marcus Cole stood on the observation platform, watching as the ships began to wake. Engines hummed with power that made his teeth ache. Lights rippled across hulls like thoughts across a sleeping mind. Crews who had trained in secret for decades ran to their stations, their faces grim but determined. Send the signal, Cole said to his assistant. Tell Admiral Tanaka, the Armada is ready, and send a message to the Valdrix. An hour later, every screen on the alien flagship displayed a single image, the flag of the United Terran Coalition, and a single message in the Valdrix language. We do not surrender. We do not kneel. Come and take our world if you can. High Arbiter Kethvoran stared at the message for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. It was a cold, cruel sound that echoed through his command chamber. His officers joined him, their alien faces twisted with amusement. Brave words from dead creatures, Kethvoran said. I have heard such defiance before. From the Orathi, before I burned their crystal cities, from the Dilun, before I boiled their seas. These humans are no different. They are small, they are weak, they are afraid, and they hide their fear behind empty words. He turned to his navigation officer. Move the fleet toward the third planet. We will make an example of their red colony first. Let them watch their people die before we take their homeworld. The Valdrix fleet began to move. 2,000 ships of death and conquest sliding through the void toward Mars, but in the shadows behind them, invisible to every sensor, 150 black shapes followed. Captain Elena Vance stood on the bridge of the flagship Revenant, watching the alien fleet through screens that showed heat signatures and energy patterns. Her crew was silent, focused, ready. They don't see us, Commander Idris Okonkwo said from his station. They have no idea we're here. Vance nodded slowly. They've never hunted something that hunts back. They've forgotten what it means to be prey. She opened a channel to the entire Armada. All ships. This is Revenant Actual. Hold position and maintain silence. When they reach the kill zone, we end this. Humanity remembers, and humanity does not kneel. In the darkness between worlds, the hunters became the hunted, and the Valdrix did not even know it. Captain Elena Vance had been dead for 15 years. At least, that was what her family believed. That was what her friends thought. That was what every record in every database on Earth confirmed. Elena Vance, promising young officer, killed in a training accident in 2332. Body never recovered. A small funeral, with an empty coffin. The truth was much stranger. She stood now on the bridge of the Revenant, the most powerful warship humanity had ever built, and watched the alien fleet move through the darkness toward Mars. She was 42 years old, but she looked 30. The precursor technology in her blood kept her young, kept her sharp, kept her ready for a war that everyone hoped would never come. Now that war was here. Captain, Commander Okonkwo said from his station, I'm reading increased energy signatures from the Valdrix command ship. They're charging weapons. Vance nodded. They want to destroy the Mars colony first. Make humanity watch before they come for Earth. She turned to her communications officer. Open a channel to the Armada, encryption level black. The channel opened, and 150 captains listened in silence. This is Vance. In a few hours the enemy will reach Mars. They think they're going to slaughter a helpless colony. They think we're going to sit and watch. She paused. They're wrong. When I give the signal, we decloak and hit them from behind. They won't know what happened. They won't have time to react. We've trained for this moment our entire lives. Some of us gave up our families. Some of us gave up our names. We did it because we knew this day might come. Well, it's here. So let's show these alien bastards why you don't threaten humanity. She closed the channel and returned her attention to the tactical display. The Valdrix fleet was beautiful in a terrible way. Their ships moved like living things, organic metal flowing and shifting as they traveled. They were confident. They were arrogant. They had conquered 200 star systems and enslaved dozens of species. Why should they fear a race that had barely left its own solar system? Commander Okonkwo walked over to stand beside her. He was a tall man from the African Union, with dark skin and thoughtful eyes. He had been with the Black Armada since its beginning, one of the first volunteers recruited from the regular fleet. Like Vance, his family thought he was dead. Like Vance, he had made peace with that sacrifice long ago. You know, he said quietly, I always wondered if we'd actually have to do this. Part of me hoped we'd spend our whole lives training for a battle that never came. And now? He smiled, but there was no humor in it. Now, I'm glad we're ready. Imagine if we weren't. Imagine if humanity faced this with nothing but nuclear missiles and old chemical rockets. Vance imagined it. She imagined Earth burning. She imagined the Valdrix landing troops in the streets of Tokyo, New York, Lagos, Mumbai. She imagined children in chains, families torn apart, an entire species bred into slavery. That's why we exist, she said. That's why we gave up everything. For this moment, across the solar system, the Black Armada moved in perfect formation. The ships were ghosts, invisible to radar, invisible to visual detection, invisible to every sensor the Valdrix possessed. The alien fleet passed Saturn, then Jupiter, completely unaware of the death that followed them. On the Valdrix command ship, High Arbiter Keth Voran reviewed his battle plans with cold satisfaction. He had done this many times before. The pattern was always the same. Arrive, demand, surrender. Destroy something precious. Accept surrender. Begin harvest. Humans were soft creatures, he knew. Their bodies were fragile. Their minds were weak. They would break easily, like all the others. High Arbiter, his sensor officer said, we are approaching the Red Planet. Good. Prepare the devastation cannons. I want to crack their largest colony open like an egg. The weapons of the Valdrix flagship began to glow with terrible energy. Each devastation cannon could punch through a planet's crust, triggering earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that would make the surface uninhabitable. Keth Voran had used them on 12 worlds. Each time, the target species had surrendered within hours. On Mars, 15 million people waited in terror. They had watched the alien fleet approach on their screens. They had heard the demand for surrender. And they had heard Admiral Tanaka's defiant response. But defiance was one thing. Survival was another. Sarah Chen was a teacher in the Mars Central Colony. She had gathered her students in the underground shelter, telling them stories to keep them calm while death approached from the stars. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she turned the pages of the old paper book she held. And the brave knight faced the dragon, she read, even though he was afraid. Because some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. A little boy raised his hand. Teacher, are we going to die? Sarah looked at the child. He was 7 years old. He had been born on Mars, had never seen Earth except in pictures. This red planet was his home, the only world he had ever known. I don't know, she said honestly, but I know that people are fighting for us right now. Brave people who have given everything to protect us. And I believe in them. She had no idea how right she was. The Valdrix fleet entered weapons range of Mars. Keth Voran raised his hand to give the order to fire. This was his favorite moment, the moment before destruction, when his victims still held on to hope. Then space itself tore open behind him. 150 ships decloaked simultaneously. They emerged from nothing, black shapes against the black void, visible only because they blocked the stars behind them. And they opened fire with weapons that made Valdrix technology look like children's toys. The Rift Lances struck first. These were the primary weapons of the Black Armada, based on precursor technology that humanity still did not fully understand. They did not fire energy or projectiles. They fired holes in reality itself. Wherever a Rift Lance hit, space folded in on itself, crushing everything within a sphere half a kilometer wide. 200 Valdrix ships died in the first minute. They simply ceased to exist, crumpled by forces that ignored shields, ignored armor, ignored every defense the aliens possessed. One moment they were there. The next moment, nothing. Keth Voran spun toward his sensor display, his face twisting with shock and rage. What is happening? Where did they come from? Unknown contacts behind us, High Arbiter. We're taking massive casualties, our shields are useless. The disciplined Valdrix formation broke apart as ship after ship vanished. Captains panicked, firing in all directions, hitting nothing. The Black Armada moved through them like wolves through sheep, silent and deadly and utterly without mercy. On the bridge of the Revenant, Captain Vance watched the slaughter with grim satisfaction. All ships, maintain formation. Target their command vessels first. Cut off the head, and the body dies. The Revenant drove forward into the heart of the Valdrix fleet, weapons blazing. Behind her, the Armada followed. They were outnumbered, yes, but numbers meant nothing against weapons that rewrote the laws of physics. Keth Voran's flagship took 3 direct hits. The first destroyed its engines. The second collapsed its shields. The third tore through the bridge itself, exposing it to the vacuum of space. In his final moments, as the air rushed from his lungs and the cold embrace of space claimed him, Keth Voran saw the black ship that had killed him. He saw the name painted on its hull in letters of white, Revenant. He died without understanding what it meant. He died without knowing that a Revenant was a creature that returned from the dead to take revenge on the living. It was, perhaps, the most appropriate death humanity could have given him. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the Valdrix subjugation fleet had lost 800 ships. The survivors fled in disorder, burning their engines at maximum power to escape the black nightmare that had fallen upon them. On Mars, Sarah Chen and her students emerged from the shelter to see streaks of light crossing the sky, debris from destroyed alien vessels burning up in the thin atmosphere. The children cheered, not understanding what they were seeing. Sarah understood. She fell to her knees and wept with relief. Humanity had won its first battle, but the war was only beginning. The surviving Valdrix ships fled beyond Jupiter, their sensors still showing the impossible. 800 of their vessels destroyed. High Arbiter Keth Voran dead, and the enemy, those weak, primitive humans, had not lost a single ship. Sub-Commander Vethkai now led what remained of the subjugation fleet. He had served under Keth Voran for 60 years and had never seen anything like this. The humans had weapons that should not exist. They had ships that moved like ghosts. They fought with a fury that made no sense for such a soft species. Send a message to the homeworld, he ordered, his voice shaking despite his efforts to control it. Tell the Supreme Hegemon what has happened. Tell him the humans have weapons of the old enemy, the precursors, the only species in history that had ever challenged the Valdrix dominion, and nearly won. They had been extinct for 50,000 years, destroyed in a war that almost broke the dominion itself. But their weapons were not extinct. Somehow, impossibly, the humans had found them. On Earth, news of the victory spread like sunrise. People danced in the streets of every city. They cheered and cried and held each other. For 24 hours, they had believed they were going to die. Now, suddenly, they were alive. They were free. They had won. Admiral Tanaka watched the celebrations from her office in Geneva, but she did not smile. She knew what the others did not. This was not victory. This was only the first battle. Her communicator buzzed. It was Captain Vance, calling from the Revenant. Admiral, the enemy survivors have retreated past Jupiter. Our ships are damaged but operational. What are your orders? Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. She looked out the window at the crowds below, at the joy on their faces, at the hope in their eyes. They thought the danger was over. They thought humanity had won. Captain, how long would it take the Valdrix to send reinforcements from their homeworld? Vance checked her tactical computer. Based on the full drive technology we've analyzed, approximately 2 weeks. Maybe less if they push their engines. And how large a force could they send? There was silence on the line. When Vance spoke again, her voice was heavy. Their records show a standing fleet of over 50,000 warships. If they view us as a serious threat, they could send 10,000. Maybe more. Tanaka closed her eyes. 10,000 ships. The Black Armada had 150. Even with their superior technology, those odds were impossible. Then we cannot wait for them to come to us. Tanaka said, we need to strike first. We need to hurt them so badly that they cannot recover. We need to make them fear us. Admiral, with respect, we don't have the numbers for an offensive war. No, we don't. But we have something they don't expect. We have the element of surprise. They don't know how many ships we have. They don't know our capabilities. Right now, they're afraid and confused. We need to use that. Vance understood. In war, psychology mattered as much as firepower. The Valdrix had never been defeated. They had never faced an enemy that fought back and won. Their entire civilization was built on the belief that they were invincible. What happens when you prove that belief wrong? What do you need from us, Admiral? Tanaka opened her tactical display, showing the map of Valdrix space that humanity had assembled over decades of secret observation. One system glowed red, Vethkar, home to the largest shipyards in the Dominion. I need you to destroy their ability to build more ships. I need you to free their slaves. And I need you to send a message that will echo across their entire empire. 3 days later, the Black Armada gathered in the darkness beyond Neptune. They had repaired their damage, restocked their weapons, and welcomed reinforcements from the hidden shipyards on Pluto's moon. 160 ships now, crewed by men and women who understood they might not survive what came next. Captain Vance addressed them from the Revenant's bridge. What we're about to do has never been attempted. We're going to jump 400 light-years into the heart of enemy territory. We're going to destroy their shipyards and free their slaves. And we're going to show the entire Dominion that humanity is not prey. She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. Some were young, barely out of training. Others were veterans who had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment. All of them were afraid. All of them were determined. Some of us will not come back. I won't lie to you about that. But what we do today will save billions of lives, human lives, and the lives of every species the Valdrix have enslaved. This is why we exist. This is why we sacrificed everything. She stood straight, her voice rising. Black Armada, we jump in 30 minutes. Check your systems, say your prayers, and remember why you're here. The jump was violent. Fold space travel was not meant for human minds. For 12 hours, the crews experienced visions and nightmares as their ships tore through dimensions that had no names. Some screamed, some prayed, some simply closed their eyes and waited for it to end. When the Armada emerged, they were in the Vethkar system, and before them hung the greatest shipyards in the Valdrix Dominion. The orbital stations were enormous, each one capable of building 100 warships at once. Massive frames held half-completed vessels. Automated factories worked constantly, turning raw materials into weapons of conquest. And in the shadow of the stations, on the barren moons below, millions of slaves labored in mining camps. The Valdrix defenders never saw the attack coming. One moment, space was empty. The next moment, 160 black ships appeared from nothing and opened fire. The rift lances tore the shipyards apart. Stations that had taken centuries to build collapsed in seconds, folding in on themselves like paper crushed in a fist. Half-built warships broke apart and tumbled into the void. Factories exploded in silent balls of fire. Commander Okonkwo led the Wraith Corps in the assault on the slave camps. These were elite soldiers, enhanced with precursor nanotechnology. They could survive in vacuum. They could fight without weapons if necessary. And they had trained for this mission for years. The camps held 3 species: the insectoid Veth, the crystalline Orathi, and the aquatic Delun. All 3 had been conquered by the Valdrix long ago. All 3 had been broken, bred for labor. Stripped of hope, when the Wraith Corps breached the camp walls, the slaves cowered in fear. They expected punishment. They expected death. They did not expect what happened next. "We are human," Okonkwo announced through his suit's translator. "We are here to free you." The slaves did not understand at first. Freedom was a concept they had forgotten. But slowly, hesitantly, they began to rise. They looked at their broken chains. They looked at the burning shipyards above. They looked at the strange creatures in black armor who had come from the stars to save them. An old Veth, a being like a mantis made of emerald chitin, approached Okonkwo on shaking legs. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you fight the Dominion for us?" Okonkwo removed his helmet so the alien could see his face. "Because what they did to you, they wanted to do to us. Because no species should be slaves. And because today, we're not just fighting for humanity. We're fighting for everyone the Valdrix have hurt." The old Veth stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something that no Veth had done in generations. He laughed. It was a strange sound, clicking and buzzing, but unmistakable. and soon, other slaves joined him. They laughed because they were free. They laughed because hope had returned. They laughed because the unbeatable Dominion was burning in the sky above them. Captain Vance watched from the Revenant as the last shipyard collapsed. Her tactical display showed minimal casualties, only 3 ships lost, all crews evacuated. They had struck the Dominion's heart and lived. "Open a channel," she ordered. "All frequencies. I want every Valdrix ship, every station, every planet in this sector to hear this." The channel opened. Vance spoke slowly and clearly, knowing her words would be translated into a dozen languages. "We are humanity. 3 days ago, you came to our world and demanded our surrender. You threatened to enslave us, to destroy our civilization, to break our spirits. You thought we were weak. You thought we were afraid. You were wrong." She gestured at the burning remains of the shipyards. "This is what happens when you threaten us. This is what happens when you try to make us kneel. We do not forget. We do not forgive, and we are just getting started." She ended the transmission and turned to her navigation officer. "Set course for home. We've sent our message. Now we prepare for their answer." Behind them, as the Black Armada jumped back into fold space, the freed slaves watched the stars and began to hope again. And across the Dominion, in every slave camp and conquered world, whispers began to spread. The humans were coming. Deep in the core of the Valdrix homeworld, in a chamber that had not been opened for 1,000 years, something ancient began to wake. Etaf Moral the Undying had ruled the Dominion for 4,000 years. He had led the war against the precursors. He had watched 100 species bow before him. He had grown so powerful, so certain of his dominion over the stars, that he had allowed himself to sleep for centuries at a time, trusting his servants to manage the empire while he dreamed. Now his servants were waking him with terrible news. "Supreme Hegemon," the high priest said, trembling as he knelt before the massive figure rising from the hibernation pool. "We have suffered a disaster. The subjugation fleet sent to the human system has been destroyed. Our shipyards at Vethkar have been reduced to debris. And the humans have weapons of the old enemy." EDF's Moral was silent for a long moment. He was enormous, twice the size of a normal Valdrix, his body covered in ancient scars from battles fought millennia ago. When he spoke, his voice was like stones grinding together. "The precursors were destroyed. I killed them myself. Yes, Supreme Hegemon. But somehow, the humans found their technology. They have ships that cannot be detected. They have weapons that fold space itself. They fight like nothing we have ever seen." Tethys Moral rose from the pool, black fluid dripping from his armored hide. "Show me." They showed him the recordings from the battle near the human world. They showed him the destruction of the shipyards. They showed him the message that Captain Vance had broadcast across the sector. With Moral watched it all without expression. When it was over, he spoke one word. "Assemble." "Supreme Hegemon? Assemble the Grand Armada. Every ship, every warrior, every weapon we possess. I will lead them myself." The high priest hesitated. "The Grand Armada has not been assembled in 3,000 years. The last time was against the precursors themselves, and now we face their heirs." Wythe Moral's eyes burned with cold fire. "These humans have made a mistake. They have reminded me what it feels like to be challenged. They have given me a reason to wake from my dreams." He began to walk toward the door, each step shaking the floor. "I will go to their world. I will burn it to ash, and I will scatter their remains across the void so that no species ever dares to defy us again." The order went out across the Dominion. Every ship, every fleet, every weapon that could be moved was called to the homeworld. From 100 star systems, warships began their journey. 10,000 vessels, 20,000, 30,000, the largest military force the galaxy had seen in 3 millennia. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity prepared for the storm. Admiral Tanaka had spent weeks building defenses. The asteroid belt was now filled with mines and automated weapons platforms. Mars and Luna had been transformed into fortress worlds, bristling with weapons. Earth itself was protected by orbital shields that had never been tested in battle, but she knew it would not be enough. The Black Armada had 160 ships. Even with Earth's regular fleet added, they had less than 600 vessels. Against the Grand Armada, those numbers meant nothing. "We need allies," she told the War Council. "The species we freed at Vethkar. They have ships, hidden away. They have warriors who remember how to fight. If we can convince them to stand with us, we might have a chance. Captain Vance volunteered for the mission. She took the Revenant and a small escort to the refugee camps where the freed slaves had been relocated. There, she met with the leaders of the Veth, the Orathi, and the Delun. The old Veth who had laughed at the shipyards spoke for his people. You ask us to fight the Dominion again, to risk the destruction of what little we have left. I ask you to help us save yourselves, Vance replied. If the Dominion destroys humanity, do you think they will leave you in peace? They will hunt you down. They will drag you back to the camps. Everything we've accomplished will be for nothing. And if we fight and lose, then we die free. We die standing up. We die knowing that we did everything we could. Vance met the old Veth's eyes. I know you're afraid. I'm afraid too, but I'd rather die fighting than live as a slave. Wouldn't you? The old Veth was silent for a long time. Then slowly he nodded. My people have forgotten how to hope. You have reminded us. We will fight beside you, human. And if we die, we will die as warriors, not as property. The Orathi and the Delun agreed as well. Within days, hidden ships emerged from their concealment across the sector. They were old vessels, damaged and poorly maintained, but they were ships nonetheless. 300 more added to humanity's fleet. 900 vessels against 30,000. The odds were still impossible, but impossible had become humanity's specialty. Commander Okonkwo spent the final days before the battle in the archives, studying the precursor data they had recovered. He was looking for anything that might help a weapon, a strategy, a weakness in the Valdrix that they could exploit. What he found instead was a warning. The precursors had not lost to the Valdrix because they were outfought. They had lost because they became like their enemy. In their desperation to win, they had built weapons that could destroy stars. They had modified their own bodies until they were no longer recognizable. They had committed atrocities that haunted them long after the enemy was defeated. In the end, they had chosen extinction rather than live with what they had become. Okonkwo brought the records to Captain Vance. She read them in silence, her face growing pale. They're warning us, she said finally. They're telling us that winning isn't enough. We have to win, and still remain human. Can we do that? Okonkwo asked. Against an enemy like the Valdrix? Vance looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Ythmoril was coming with the largest fleet in history. He was coming to destroy everything she loved, and she was supposed to find a way to stop him while keeping her humanity intact. We have to try, she said. Because if we become monsters to defeat monsters, then we've already lost. The precursors understood that. They left us their weapons, but they also left us their warning. We have to be better than they were. The Grand Armada entered the solar system 3 weeks later. 30,000 ships, led by the massive flagship Dominion's Wrath, a vessel the size of a small moon, armed with weapons that could crack planets. Ythmoril stood on the command bridge, looking at the blue and green world that hung in the distance. Such a small planet, such a small species, and yet they had caused him more trouble than any enemy in thousands of years. He opened a channel to broadcast his message. Humans, I am Ythmoril, supreme hegemon of the Valdrix Dominion. I have ruled the stars since before your species learned to walk upright. I have crushed 100 civilizations and broken 1,000 worlds. Your defiance ends today. Surrender, and I will make your extinction quick. Resist, and I will make it last for generations. On the bridge of the Revenant, Captain Vance listened to the message. Her crew watched her, waiting for her response. She thought about everything they had sacrificed, the families they would never see again, the lives they had given up, the years spent preparing for this moment. Then she opened her own channel. Ythmoril. You've conquered species that didn't know how to fight back. You've broken peoples who had already given up hope, but you've never faced anyone like us. We're not going to surrender. We're not going to run. We're going to stand and fight, and we're going to show you what humanity is made of. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was steel. You want Earth? Come and take it, if you can. Ythmoril smiled, a cold, cruel expression that had been the last thing countless enemies had ever seen. At last, a species with spirit. It will make breaking you all the more satisfying. He raised his hand. All ships, advance. Let the slaughter begin. The battle for Earth had begun. The sky above Earth burned with the light of dying ships. The Grand Armada came like a wave of destruction, 30,000 vessels against humanity's 900. The first exchanges of fire lit up the darkness between worlds. Ships exploded in silent balls of flame. Debris scattered across the void like seeds thrown by a careless hand. Admiral Tanaka commanded from Earth's orbital station, watching the battle unfold on screens that showed death on a scale she had never imagined. The Black Armada fought like demons, their rift lances tearing holes in enemy formations. The allied ships of the Veth, Orathi, and Delan threw themselves at the Valdrix with the fury of species who had nothing left to lose. But it was not enough. For every Valdrix ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The Grand Armada pushed forward, absorbing casualties that would have broken any other fleet, driven by Youthmoral's iron will. "We're losing the outer defense line," her aide reported, his voice tight with fear. "The Mars batteries are down. Luna is under direct attack." Tanaka watched a group of human destroyers sacrifice themselves to stop a Valdrix assault on a civilian transport. The small ships disappeared in a flash of light, buying seconds for the transport to escape. "Hold the line," she ordered. "Every minute we buy is another minute for evacuations." Across the solar system, the battle raged. Captain Vance drove the Revenant through the heart of the enemy fleet, her weapons carving paths of destruction. But even she knew they could not win a war of attrition. They needed to cut off the head. "We have to take out Youthmoral," she said to Commander Okonkwo. "If he dies, their command structure collapses. It's the only way." Okonkwo looked at the tactical display showing the Dominion's wrath. The flagship was the size of a small moon, surrounded by hundreds of escort vessels, bristling with weapons that could destroy planets. Getting close to it would be suicide. "I'll lead the assault," he said. "Give me the Wraith Corps and a dozen volunteer ships. We punch through, board the flagship, and kill Youthmoral." "Idris, that's a one-way mission. You know that." "I know." He met her eyes steadily. "But if we don't do it, everyone dies. Not just us. Everyone on Earth. Everyone on Mars. Every human being in existence." He put his hand on her shoulder. "Elena, we've spent our whole lives preparing to make this sacrifice. Let me make it count." Vance wanted to argue. She wanted to find another way. But there was no other way. There had never been another way. "Go," she said, her voice breaking. "And Idris, thank you. For everything." He smiled a real smile. Warm and human and full of peace. "I'll see you on the other side, Captain. One way or another." The assault force launched 30 minutes later. 12 ships, the best crews in the Armada, with Commander Okonkwo's team of Wraith Corps soldiers ready to breach the enemy flagship. They dove into the Valdrix formation like a spear thrown at the heart of a giant. 9 ships died in the first minute. The Valdrix escorts closed in, weapons blazing, but the 3 surviving vessels punched through, their engines burning at maximum power, their pilots pushing their ships beyond any limits they were designed for. The Revenant covered their approach, drawing fire from dozens of enemy ships. Vance watched her shields fail, felt her ship shudder as weapons tore through her hull, and kept fighting. She would hold the line for as long as she had breath in her body. The 3 assault ships reached the Dominion's wrath. Their crews died buying seconds for the Wraith Corps to breach the hull. Okonkwo and 40 soldiers carved their way into the massive vessel, fighting through corridors designed for beings twice their size, killing everything that stood in their way. They lost half their number in the first 10 minutes, then half again. By the time they reached the throne chamber at the heart of the ship, only Okonkwo and 5 soldiers remained, and there, waiting for them, was Youthmoral, the Undying. He was massive, a creature of nightmare, covered in ancient armor, holding a weapon that burned with dark energy. He looked at the small humans who had invaded his sanctum and laughed. "You are the best your species has to offer. Tiny, fragile, weak." He stepped forward, each footfall shaking the floor. "I have killed beings 100 times your size. I have broken gods and destroyed civilizations. What do you think you can do to me?" Okonkwo's soldiers opened fire. Their weapons, the most advanced humanity possessed, bounced off Youthmoral's armor like rain off stone. He walked through the barrage as if it were nothing, and killed 3 of them with a single sweep of his blade. The remaining soldiers fell back, but Okonkwo stepped forward. He carried a precursor weapon, a blade that could cut through dimensions, the same technology that powered the Rift Lances. It was the last gift the precursors had left for their heirs. "You want to know what we can do?" Okonkwo said. We can adapt. We can learn. We can take the weapons of a dead civilization and turn them against the monsters who killed them. He raised the blade, which hummed with power that made the air itself vibrate. The precursors couldn't stop you. But they gave us a chance, and that's all we ever needed. HFY Moral's eyes narrowed. That weapon. I remember it. I felt it pierce my flesh 10,000 years ago, when the precursors made their last stand. He raised his own blade. It killed me once. I survived. What makes you think you can do better? Because I'm not trying to kill a god, Okonkwo said. I'm just killing a tyrant. They clashed in the heart of the flagship while the battle raged outside. HFY Moral was faster than something his size should have been, stronger than anything Okonkwo had ever faced. The hegemon's blade cut through Okonkwo's armor, opening wounds that should have been fatal. But Okonkwo kept fighting. He thought of his family, who believed he was dead. He thought of Captain Vance, holding the line against impossible odds. He thought of Earth, of children playing in parks, and lovers walking hand in hand, of all the ordinary moments that would never happen again if he failed. He found an opening. The precursor blade slid between the plates of HFY Moral's armor and pierced his primary heart. The hegemon staggered, his eyes wide with shock. He had survived this wound before, he had survived everything before, but this time was different. This time, the blade stayed in place, and reality folded around it. What? What are you? HFY Moral gasped. Okonkwo was on his knees, bleeding from a dozen wounds, his life draining away. But he managed to smile. We are humanity, he said, his voice carrying across all frequencies as the ship's communication systems broadcast his words to every vessel in the system. And we don't kneel. HFY Moral collapsed. The blade in his chest pulsed once, twice, 3 times, and then, the supreme hegemon of the Valdrix Dominion was dead. The effect was immediate. The Grand Armada had fought as a single organism, coordinated by HFY Moral's iron will. With him gone, that coordination shattered. Ships stopped firing. Officers waited for orders that never came. Some surrendered. Some fled. Some fought on mindlessly until they were destroyed. By dawn on Earth, it was over. Captain Vance found Commander Okonkwo's body in the throne chamber of the Dominion's wrath. He was slumped against the corpse of the creature he had killed, the precursor blade still clutched in his hand. He looked peaceful, she thought. He looked like a man who had finished what he set out to do. She knelt beside him and closed his eyes. You did it, Idris. You saved us all. The battle for Earth had cost humanity dearly. 300 ships destroyed. 50,000 lives lost. Entire cities damaged by debris that fell from the sky. The survivors emerged from their shelters to find a world forever changed. But they had survived. They had won. In the months that followed, the Valdrix Dominion collapsed. Without HFY Moral's leadership, ancient rivalries tore the Empire apart. Enslaved species rose up across 100 worlds, throwing off their chains. The coalition that humanity had built humans, Veth, Orathi, Delun, became the foundation of a new order. 1 year after the battle, they called it the Galactic Coalition. It was dedicated to a simple principle. Never again would one species dominate another. Never again would tyrants like HFY Moral rise to threaten the innocent. The Black Armada, once humanity's secret weapon, now patrolled the stars openly, a warning to anyone who thought might made right. Captain Elena Vance stood at the dedication ceremony for the memorial in Geneva, a simple black obelisk, inscribed with the names of everyone who had died defending Earth. At its base, 3 words that would echo through history. Admiral Tanaka spoke first. 1 year ago, we faced extinction. An enemy came to our world and demanded our surrender. They thought we were weak. They thought we would break. She paused, looking at the crowd of humans and aliens who had gathered. They were wrong. We stood. We fought. We won. Not because we were stronger than them, not because we had better weapons, but because we refused to give up. Because we found allies who believed in freedom as much as we did. Because when the darkness came, we chose to be the light. Vance thought of Okonkwo. She thought of all the crews who had died in ships with names like Defiant and Unstoppable and No Surrender. She thought of the precursors, who had given humanity a chance even as their own civilization crumbled. She thought of Sarah Chen, the teacher on Mars, who had told her students that some things were worth fighting for even when the fight seemed impossible. She stepped forward to speak, and the crowd fell silent. My friend Idris Okonkwo gave his life to kill the Valdrix hegemon. In his final moments, he said 3 words that I will never forget. 3 words that define who we are and what we stand for. She looked at the memorial, at the names carved in stone, at the 3 words at the base that would remind future generations of what humanity had achieved. We don't kneel. The crowd repeated the words, first softly, then louder, until the sound echoed across the plaza and up into the sky. We don't kneel. We don't kneel. We don't kneel. And somewhere, in the space between stars, the souls of the fallen heard. And they smiled. Above the memorial, the sun set in colors of gold and crimson. The stars appeared, one by one, in a sky that belonged to humanity now, not because they had conquered it, but because they had earned it. The Black Armada floated in orbit, silent and watchful. They would remain there, now and always, ready for whatever came next, because humanity had learned the lesson the universe had tried to teach them. Freedom is never free, but it is always worth the price.